On January 26, 1977, a teenage hunter trudging through the snow-packed fields of rural Campbell County, Kentucky, noticed carrion birds circling low over a ditch. What he found beneath their wings was not animal game, but a frozen human torso, cleanly severed from its limbs. This gruesome discovery would soon expose a chilling domestic nightmare. A joyful flower child had met an unimaginably dark winter. You might think you know the people you share a dinner table with, but how deep does their darkness truly run?
Imagine walking out into a quiet, frozen landscape, only to find the most macabre scene imaginable staring back at the gray sky. A local boy followed a flock of circling vultures near a rural highway, discovering a woman's torso with her head intact, but completely missing her arms and legs. Detective Hedberg arrived within the hour, noting that the clean, precise nature of the post-mortem cuts pointed toward human intent rather than animal scavenging. The community instantly fell into a panic because 3 young women had been found murdered in nearby woods between September 1975 and November 1976. Everyone assumed a roaming psychopathic serial killer was actively hunting local girls. Medical examiners kept the remains under guard overnight, waiting for the tissue to thaw before they could perform a proper autopsy. Lock your doors securely whenever a community's sense of safety vanishes overnight. While investigators searched the frozen ground for clues, the scene stood in stark contrast to the bright sunshine world Diane Camm usually inhabited. Just 8 months earlier, the vibrant 22-year-old nurse had walked down the aisle of a Fort Thomas stone church wearing a bright yellow wedding dress. She was a self-proclaimed hippie child who carried daisies instead of traditional roses, filling the room with radiant energy. She locked eyes with her new husband, 24-year-old restaurant worker Kevin Murtaugh, completely convinced her lonely days were over. Her sister Carrie watched the couple drive away in Diane's distinct yellow Volkswagen Beetle, which was proudly spray-painted with "Just Married" across the back glass. The color of sunshine had officially collided with pure darkness. No one inside that church could have guessed that the groom would soon become her greatest danger. Always watch for sudden shifts in personality when people enter highly restrictive relationships. The immediate connection between Diane and Kevin was forged from deep childhood scars that initially felt like a healing miracle. Diane had been adopted at 6 months old by the Camm family in Louisville, Kentucky, but her world fractured at age 15 when her adoptive parents divorced. Across the Atlantic, Kevin had been abandoned on an Irish convent doorstep as an infant before being adopted by an American family, who also split up a few years later. When they met at a backyard party in 1973, their shared history of abandonment made them feel entirely safe for the first time. They wrote personal vows on scraps of paper, promising to build the stable family they both desperately lacked. Wounded souls often mistake deep desperation for true love. This intense trauma bond rapidly transformed from a safe harbor into a suffocating domestic prison. Examine the foundational motives of your relationships before making binding commitments. Detective Hedberg knew that the most intense domestic crimes are almost always fueled by hidden personal rage. When Diane failed to show up for her hospital nursing shift on January 21, 1977, her mother frantically called the local tip line. The detective knocked on the couple's apartment door, but Kevin calmly deflected the inquiry by claiming his wife had simply driven down to Florida after a minor lover's spat. He acted entirely unbothered, showing a cold detachment that immediately set off alarm bells for the experienced investigator. While Diane's mother provided dental records that tragically confirmed the identity of the frozen torso, Kevin never called the station to check on the progress of the murder investigation. Silence can speak far louder than a frantic confession. Investigators quickly shifted their gaze from an anonymous regional serial killer straight toward the quiet husband. Document every inconsistency in a suspect's timeline during the early hours of a missing persons case. If this deep look into the dark psychology of true crime cases is giving you a fresh perspective, take a brief moment to hit the subscribe button, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We have the critical forensic breakdown of Kevin's bizarre interrogation coming up next. A shocking breakthrough came from Kevin's own best man, who broke his silence to reveal a terrifying conversation. He informed Fort Thomas authorities that the newlyweds' marriage had turned incredibly volatile just 3 months after the wedding ceremony. Diane had previously escaped to Sarasota, Florida, for an entire month to get away from Kevin's increasingly aggressive and controlling behavior. When Kevin discovered she might be seeing someone else during her time away, his deep-seated fears of abandonment triggered an intense, dangerous fury. He openly told his best man that he wanted to kill both Diane and her suspected lover. Toxic control is always a direct byproduct of internal weakness. The police finally possessed a clear, verifiable motive that completely shattered the groom's innocent facade. Recognize the subtle warning signs of isolation and extreme jealousy before domestic conflicts escalate into violence. How far would a desperate killer go to avoid a lifetime behind bars? 3 days after the torso was found, detectives brought Kevin into the morgue to force a formal identification. But he broke down, sobbing, refusing to look at his wife's face. They pushed forward into a grueling 7-hour interrogation at the police station until his composure completely cracked. Kevin frantically spun a preposterous tale, claiming he returned home to find Diane dead in the bathtub from a drug overdose. He insisted that he strangled and dismembered her body solely to protect her family from the deep shame of a suicide. Criminal alibis often defy the basic laws of human logic. Investigators easily recognized this bizarre story as an obvious, panicked fabrication designed to hide a brutal murder. Press suspects hard on the structural loopholes of their stories during high-stakes interviews. Picture the grim scene as a heavily guarded police convoy drove out into the freezing landscape, led by a killer pointing toward the snow. Kevin finally agreed to guide Detective Hedeberg to the exact remote locations where he had hidden the rest of Diane's remains. In a series of desolate, snow-covered thickets, miles away from the initial torso site, forensic teams successfully recovered the missing arms and legs. This gruesome recovery totally destroyed any remaining shred of the groom's defense, proving he had systematically taken a blade to his wife's body. The family was left to face the horrific reality that the quiet young man they welcomed into their home was an absolute monster. True evil always leaves a permanent trail in the snow. The recovery of physical evidence completely solidifies a prosecutor's case before entering a courtroom. Secure every square inch of a secondary crime scene to ensure no forensic elements are compromised. Kevin claimed he merely butchered a corpse to stage a crime, but the official toxicology records told an entirely different story. The medical examiner discovered a moderate amount of sedatives in Diane's system, which was just enough to completely knock her out, but nowhere near a lethal dose. Prosecutors successfully argued that Kevin secretly slipped these heavy downers into his wife's drink to deliberately weaken her defenses before mounting his attack. While she lay unconscious, he wrapped a thick rope around her neck and slowly choked the remaining life out of her. The presence of broken bones in her neck and vital tissue reactions proved conclusively that she was very much alive when the strangulation occurred. Science consistently exposes the desperate lies of a violent predator. A jury found Kevin Murtaugh guilty of murder, closing the book on a short-lived marriage that ended in absolute horror. Rely heavily on hard scientific data rather than emotional testimonies during complex criminal trials. The tragic execution of Diane Murtaugh proves that deep, unhealed childhood wounds can sometimes create a dangerous prison instead of a safe harbor. When toxic control masks itself as love, the consequences can quickly turn lethal. If you want to see how another seemingly perfect relationship unraveled into a high-stakes criminal investigation, click on our breakdown of the Black Widow of Ohio case right now.